Welcome to Crimson Clues, where shadows hide secrets and silence reveals the truth. Every story is a puzzle, and every clue takes you closer to the answer. Subscribe now, join the hunt, and let the mystery begin. Chapter 1. The Telegram and the Tower. It was a particularly Scotch rain that greeted us at Inverness, thin as muslin, but twice as persistent, infiltrating beneath the collar and into the heart. Poirot, dressed in a travelling ulster far too elegant for the platform, gazed out at the heathered hills with a pursed mouth, indicating that I was aware of a discomfort worse than plain humidity. He mumbled, "My friend, Scotland is a country of mists. Where there is mist, there are things that take whatever forms they like." "Pooh," I said, with the bluster of a man who hadn't had his tea yet. "Are you referring to ghosts? You do not believe in them." He did not respond. His gaze had caught on a young woman running along the platform, her cap skewed and her face blanched with haste. She walked straight to the station master and handed him a telegram. I gave it little thought until the official pointed squarely at us with the Highland economy of gesture. "You are Poirot?" she questioned, approaching. "I am Ela Drummond from Glencarron. Please pardon me for contacting you in this manner, but there has been an incident at the castle. We need assistance." Poirot was very courteous. "Mademoiselle, you do me too much honor. You have the kindness to tell me a little." She shoved the telegram at him. It was addressed to Poirot at the Caledonian Hotel, posted 2 days before, and read, "Come at once if you want justice done." The Grey Lady walked again. "FD, I said, your father. My uncle Fergus Drummond led Glencarron. He died last night." She swallowed after a fall in the eastern tower. "Hey, monsieur locked himself inside." The servants heard him cry out, followed by the sound of the old pipe's skull, which plays on its own. The door would not open. When they broke it, he was gone. "Gone," I reiterated. "Gone out the window," she said softly. "But the window is 80 ft above the cobbles. There were no marks below, no blood and no body. It is only this." She opened her gloved hand. On the palm was a small disc of slate-black wax with a ragged edge, as if torn from a seal. Poirot accepted it with an expression I couldn't understand. "And the Grey Lady. She has been spotted twice this week on the ramparts at moonrise. There is some talk." Her mouth trembled. "I do not like talking. I like facts." "Ah," said Poirot softly. "We understand one another." We drove that afternoon via Loch Ness, grey as beaten pewter under a ling sky, and climbed at last into the glen, where Glencarron crouched upon a shoulder of rock, a place of gaunt battlements and arrows windows, its stones the colour of old ash. A cold wind ran over the moor and set the gorse nodding. The sound of it, funnelled by the ravines, had in it a high, thin note like a lament. At the great door, Mrs. Mloud, the housekeeper, met us, a formidable woman with a face carved to thrift and piety. Behind her lurked Ewan the Gilly, sandy-haired and suspicious, and the castle chaplain, the Reverend Mr. Muir, who had the stoop of a man who listened for whispers. In the library we found 2 others, Dr. Fiona Kincaid, the local physician, clear-eyed, black-haired, with capable hands, and Alistair MacRae, a cousin of the late Laird, florid and heavy 8-shouldered, who gave an impression of strength somewhat dimmed by whiskey. "It's a pity you weren't an hour earlier, sir," MacRae said, offering a hand with a grip like wet rope. "You might have laid hands on the old devil himself." The tower was well singing, and then nothing. Dr. Kincaid's voice cut across his. "Don't glamorize it, Alistair. Fergus fell or something worse. But we haven't a body, only a set of facts that contradict one another." "Dr. King," said Poirot, bowing. "In my experience, facts are like Highland cattle. They will go where they please until you show them the gate." We went at once to the east tower. A narrow corkscrew stair, worn to scoops by centuries, led to a door banded with iron. The lock had been smashed. Within was a circular chamber with a flagged floor, a narrow bed, a desk littered with papers, and a single tall lancet window giving onto the inner court, which here fell to the cobbles like the side of a well. The sill was dusted with peat ash. On the floor, inches from the window, lay a broken clay beaker and a darkened ring where something had stood. Perhaps a candle. Poirot went to his knees and examined the ash, the flags, the splinters. He spent a long time with his nose nearly touching the stone, as though to sniff out meaning. Then he straightened and looked at the window. "Hastings," he said at last, "be so good as to fetch for me a length of cord, a cork, and 3 straight pins." For what purpose? For an experiment. He smiled, but there was no lightness in it, and if you please, a clean tumbler. Mrs. Mloud fetched the items. Poe tied the cork to the cord, stuck the pins in at measured intervals, and lowered the contrivance into the well of the court, letting the cord slip between his fingers until the cork hung just above the cobbles below. Then he tugged and drew it up again. The pins were wet. The air here, he said, it flows downward. When there is mist, the court will fill as a cup. A fall one would not be seen, nor heard, murmured the Reverend Muir. The wind catches sound and turns it astray. But there is no body, said Isla very steadily. Poirot looked at the iron bedstead. No, there is no body. We went down to the court. The stones were clean of any stain, but Ewan drew us to the past where the wind had left a drift of blown dust, soft as flour. There were marks, faint, too small for a man's boot, too large for a dog, and with a peculiar spled toe. They ran for a yard and stopped, as if a creature had stepped out of nothing and back again. The Grey Lady wears no shoes, said Macrae with a grin sour as crab-apple. There's your mark. Nonsense, said Dr. Kincaid crisply. Those are bird prints distorted by the gusts. Or a child's, murmured the minister. Or the devil's, Miss Isla, if you prefer the old tale. What old tale? I asked. The Lady Mahairi, said Mrs. Mloud, crossing herself with Presbyterian scorn. She threw herself from that very window, in the time of the 45, for love of a Jacobite who never came. Since then, when there's blood in the stones, she walks. Poe picked up the little disc of wax again. And this? He asked. Mrs. Mloud drew herself up. The Laird sealed a letter last evening. He was in the habit of sealing his papers with black, a fancy of his. To whom? Asked Poirot. She glanced at Isla. My uncle wrote no less than 6 letters yesterday. Isa said 1 to a firm of Edinburgh lawyers, 1 to Dr. Kincaid, 1 to Mr. Muir, 1 to Alistair, 1 to Ewan, and 1 to me. And have these letters been delivered? Mine has not, she said, nor I think any of the others. Then, said Poirot softly, we will find them. We did in the drawer of the writing desk, each addressed, each sealed. They were all empty. Blank, said Dr. Kincaid, tapping the paper. Whatever he meant to say, he changed his mind. Or someone changed it for him, murmured Poirot. We dined that night in an oak-panelled hall, where the candles leaned with the draughts and the portraits eyed us like judges. The rain had ceased. The wind came and went in uneasy breaths. Over the venison and a somewhat militant claret, we learned the housekeeping story of Glencarron. Fergus, a widower, had brought up Isla since her parents' death. The estate, though wide in acres, was narrow in income. There was a question of a mortgage, an offer from an energy concern to lease rights for a hydroelectric scheme on the ridge, and a rumour that Alistair, if the entail broke, might contest the line. Idle, said Macrae with a rough laugh that had no merriment in it. I wish Isa well of the place if she can make it pay. I have sheep enough of my own. That is true, said Mrs. Mloud, with a tightness that suggested there was more truth than comfort in it. We had coffee in the library. Poirot sat a little apart, his eyes half closed, the cup untouched in his hand. Finally he spoke. Mademoiselle Isla, he said, will you do for me a thing not easy? Sleep tonight in your usual chamber, Mr. Macrae. You will sleep in the East Tower. Macrae snorted gladly. He'll show the Grey Lady how a Macrae keeps his wits. Dr. Kincaid frowned. I don't like it. Not with the lock broken. Precisely, said Poirot. I do not like it either. But I must see what happens when there is nothing in the way of what is intended. What is intended? I asked. Poirot looked at the dark window where the wind pressed like a listener. I do not yet know. That night the castle lay as if holding its breath. I confess that I, Londoner though I am, kept my revolver on the table beside the lamp, and started more than once at the creak of a board or the flutter of a tapestry in the draught. Towards 2 of the clock, the corridor outside shifted to a faint silver with moonlight. The pipes far off ran a thin thread of sound through the stone, and somewhere a door I could not see went softly click. I was on my feet and out, Hastings the fool, before I had thought of caution. Down the passage the moon lay in a pale bar across the flags. In the midst of it stood a woman. She was very slender, very still, with a fall of hair like night and a gown that was nothing so much as white mist in the shape of grief. She turned her head once, only seeing the idea of a face, and drifted away. I do not pretend to be a hero. I didn't cry out. I couldn't. Poe took me by the sleeve and drew me back into shadow. Do you also see her? He whispered. Yes. Then, Monomai, he spoke quietly, we saw something that is either or is not, and I'm not sure which. A sudden crash and a horse oath rang out from the tower. The next moment, Alistair McCrae emerged from the stairwell, his lips white. She was in the room with me, he exclaimed at the window, looking down on the pipes. God save us. The pipes were playing themselves. Poirot looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, It has begun. Chapter 2. Letters in Black Wax. Morning. Brought a thin sunlight and a kind of brittle cheerfulness to Glencarron, like an old soldier making jokes before a battle. Dr. Kincaid had been up since dawn, taking statements with the brisk sanity that was her habit. Ewan had seen no one. Mrs. Mloud had heard footsteps in the long gallery. The Reverend Muir, insomnia writ plain upon his delicate face, had watched. From the chapel a light in the east tower that moved as if carried by a hand. Who has the key to the tower? Poirot asked at breakfast. No one, said Ela. It was always kept in my uncle's pocket. After last night, we found it on the floor of the chamber under the bed. Poirot laid it on the tablecloth and turned it with a finger. It was iron old and a little rusty. The wards were complicated. Madame Mloud, he said politely. Who cleans the tower room? No one, she returned with severity. The laird saw to it himself, and I saw to the linen once a fortnight with him present. Ah, said Poirot, a room kept private, that is always suggestive. He asked to be shown the laird study. It lay at the end of the library, a smaller oak-panelled room that smelled of pipe smoke and paper. There we found a portrait miniature of a young woman, oval-faced with eyes that looked at one over the centuries, as if they would speak but could not. On the back was a fading label, Mahari Drummond, 1746. Excella, I said softly. She has your mouth. So they say, she returned. There was no tenderness in her voice, only a strain, as if she kept herself by force. On the desk lay a ledger, and beside it a little tray of black sealing wax wafers. Poirot examined the tray thoughtfully, then took up the ledger and turned a few pages. Hibian, he murmured. Here we have the truth about the sheep, the rents, the whiskey and the peat, all very exact, and here he tapped an entry. A sum paid last week to a firm in Edinburgh, a hire of a lantern, a smoke machine, coloured filters, and a deposit returned the next day. Stage effects, I said, startled. Issa leaned in. My uncle was never a man for theatricals. People are sometimes what they were not, said Poirot, or they are two things at once. We looked for the 6 letters again on the chance that an eye trained to them would find what we had not. Poirot, with those precise fingertips of his, held each envelope up to the light, then warmed the wax seal ever so slightly with a candle. The black oval softened. A faint imprint swam up a stag's head, the drum and crest, and beneath, barely visible, a second impression, as if another seal had touched the wax before it hardened. A palimpsest, said Poirot, a seal upon a seal. Do you see, Hastings? The first impression was perhaps of one device, then obliterated by the second. Why does a man seal letters he does not send with wax that may tell 2 stories? Because he wanted to frighten someone, said Dr. Kincaid, or convince them, or he wanted to be caught. Poirot tilted his head. All these things may be, but there is also this. He took from his pocket the torn wafer Issa had brought at the station. This wax is not like the others. It is not of this tray. It is softer with a different fat, and it smells, he put it delicately to his nostrils, of a scent, not Scotch. Not Scotch, I repeated. Orange flower, he said with a little shrug. Orchard and sun. It is used in some French cologne, yes, not by Highlands. I remembered with a start that when we met Isla at the station, a faint citrus had clung to the telegram, but Isla, watching Poirot, looked as surprised as any. Will you let me see the tower again in full daylight? Asked Poirot. I have an idea that may yet be only foolishness. We climbed. The ash upon the windowsill was still there, the faint ring upon the floor, the smashed beaker swept to one side. Poirot examined the jambs of the window, then produced from his pocket a tiny hand mirror and a reel of black silk. He fastened the silk to the mirror, lowered it out of the window so that it hugged the stones, and drew it up in minuscule stages, pausing each time to peer at what the mirror reflected. Paint, he murmured. a smear of it pale. See? And here. There is a hole drilled in the mortar, very small, recently plastered. Someone has fastened something outside, then taken it away. Fastened what? Said Isla. A step, he said simply. That's absurd, said Ewan, who had trailed after us. No man could come and go by yon window. Pooh looked down into the well of the court. No man, no, but a rope ladder could be let down and drawn up again so that a man might leave without being seen from the inner galleries. And the body, said Dr. Conincade quietly. Poirot spread his hands. It has not yet been seen. We descended to the chapel at the base of the tower. There, in a dimness warmed by coloured light from a lancet window, the Reverend Muir kept his books and his prayers. The air smelled of stone and old leather. In a niche lay the old clan pipes, mended and unplayed these many years, if the housekeeper was to be believed. "May I?" asked Poirot. The minister nodded. Poirot lifted the instrument with surprising tenderness. The bag was cracked, the reeds perished, the drones were stopped, and there was a faint film of dust upon them. So he said, "They did not play themselves." "They have not played at all," said Mr. Muir, and I saw the relief in his face. "The tale is foolishness. Only one hears what one expects to hear in such a place." "Expectation is a great musician," murmured Poirot. We lunched in a strained fashion. After Poirot asked that all who had received a blank letter should bring it to the library, he arranged them on the table, in a neat fan. "Observe," he said, "the addresses are in the same hand. Yes, but the pressure on the downstrokes is heavier in two, Macrae and Ewan's. The ink is also a trifle paler in Ears's and Mr. Muir, and there is the scent of neroli on only one." He tapped the envelope addressed to Dr. Conincade. She raised an eyebrow. "I don't use perfume. Someone in the house does, or someone who visited." He turned to Isla. "Were there any strangers at Glencarron this week past?" Isa considered. "A surveyor for the hydroelect electric scheme came Monday. 2 men from the Whiskey Company called on Tuesday. And, Mr. Forbes from the Inverness Museum was here to see the stones." "The stones?" I asked. "The Pictish fragments?" said the minister, his face lighting with a scholar's zeal, even in the midst of grief. 2 cross slabs near the south gate, and a panel with a hunting scene. Mr. Forbes is quite eminent in such matters. "Did he come to the house for tea?" said Isla in the small parlour. He was a little odd, nervous. He kept looking at the portraits as if he expected one to speak. "Some men are always looking for voices," said Mr. Muir. The afternoon waned. A watery sun crawled behind a bank of cloud and made a false dusk. Poe seemed oddly remote, absorbed in small experiments with thread, ash, and the draught beneath the tower door. I found myself irritable with him, a rare sensation, for I have, in general, the patience of a dog to his master, where Poe is concerned. "Have you a theory?" I demanded at last. "I have 3, he said. 3, and they are all inadequate," he returned. "Either the lead is not dead, or he is dead, and the body is cleverly removed." Or he stopped and gave a little shake of the head. "Now, even to state the third is to encourage the nonsense." "You think there is a human hand in this?" I said stubbornly. He glanced at me. "Always there is a human hand. But sometimes it is not one hand alone. Sometimes it is the hand of the dead through the living, and the living through the dead. We shall see." At twilight a constable from the village arrived. Macrae had sent for him in the night, but there was little he could do. He took notes of broken locks and empty letters, shook his head over the window, and departed with the air of a man who would have preferred a poacher in a ditch. It was near 11 when the second thing happened. Isa had withdrawn. The minister had gone to his chapel. Dr. Kincaid sat with us by the fire, her profile a calm cut against the flames. The housekeeper came in and set down the night tray. As she turned, the door at the far end of the hall opened of its own accord. The draught lifted the candle flames. The fire sighed and leaned, and down the gallery came the faintest fragrance, orange blossom over peat. Poirot stood. "Do not move," he said. She appeared not in the doorway this time, but in the high mirror on the landing, a shifting of pale substance, a suggestion of shoulders and a fall of hair, the old trick of reflected light. And yet it was no trick I had seen before, for in the very glass the air seemed to dew and bead as if with cold, and there came with it a sound like a gown brushing stone. Mrs. Mloud made the sign of the cross again, briskly this time, as if adding the thing to her accounts. Dr. Conincade, to her credit, walked straight to the mirror and stood before it. The figure did not vanish. It slid to one side like a fish in a stream. "It is a projection," the doctor said, voice steady from the landing above. "But there is no—" "Lantern," said Ela from the stair, white-faced in her dressing gown. "There is nothing at all." Poirot took a candle and began to ascend slowly, as if the light was something living he must not wake. We followed with that mixture of fear and curiosity that belongs to childhood and to war. On the landing above, nowhere to hide a lantern, only the banister, the long carpet, the window, the portraits. "Open the window," said Poirot. Huon did so. The scent of orange deepened, as if released from some bottle the night itself had uncorked. Poirot leaned out into the darkness, then drew back. "Hastings," he said softly, "stand where you are. Dr. Kincaid, if you please, turn your back to the mirror and look only at what the room gives you. Its shapes, its lights, its movement in the draught. Now, do you see her?" "No," she said. "And you, Hastings?" "Yes," I said, and I confess my voice shook. "She is very near." Poirot closed the window. The scent thinned, the sense of presence with it. The mirror returned us to ourselves, pale, intent, foolish. Poirot's face in that instant was the face of a man who has placed his foot confidently upon a stair that is not there. For a moment he was simply stunned. I had never seen him so. "Bong," he said at last coldly. "We will go to bed. Go to bed," I cried. "It's an order," Poirot explained. "There is nothing to do tonight." When I opened the door, he was still standing on the landing, holding the candle aloft, staring at the seam where the wall met the ceiling rather than the mirror or the stair. The explanation, if there was one, seemed to run like a crack along the house's bones. Chapter 3. The Man from Inverness. The man came out of the museum in the morning. Mr. Forbes was slim, bearded and fussy, with glasses that seemed to be about to spring from his nose in academic protest. He had, he told us without explanation, removed the small Pictish panel that had been put into the courtyard wellhead for generations and was returning it. He expressed relief at being rid of it. "It's a bad thing," he remarked as he adjusted the cloth-covered package in his hands. "A stag has a fractured leg. Crude work. But I found the carving method interesting till it arrived in my rooms. And then perhaps I'm not cut out for old houses. The panel decomposed me." Dr. Kincaid inquired, "What exactly do you mean by discomposed?" "It spoke," he said, flushing. "No, not literally. However, I awoke twice in the night with the clear sense that someone was at my door. When I opened, there was an aroma, a perfume, and the impression that the thing had moved slightly on its stand. I understand how foolish it is. I arrived at first light to return it. I apologize for the disturbance, Miss Drummond." Isa, who had listened with solemn politeness, convinced him that an apology was unnecessary. Poirot, who had been standing silently in the background, moved forward. He asked Mercia Forbes, "Did you by chance seal the crate with black wax?" Forbes blinked. "Yes, I have some in a drawer in the museum. It performs better than the red. Why?" "No matter," answered Poirot, but I noticed a flicker of uneasiness on his face. "Will you show me where the panel is?" We headed to the wellhead. The stones around it had been polished by time and hands, and the carved panel fit into a nook on one side. Its deer truly lamel-looking, its antlers weirdly cut, as if the sculptor had intended more than the literal beast and didn't know how to express it. The panel had a small stain in the upper right corner, the color of old tea. "Watermark," said Forbes quickly. It lay some time in moist. Poirot followed the smear with his finger, before quickly pressing his palm against the stone and closing his eyes. When he removed his hand, the aroma of orange flower returned so strongly that Forbes recognized it. "Good Lord!" he cried. "Do you keep pomanders in your sleeve, sir?" Poirot's jaws constricted. "No." "Then it's in the stone," answered Dr. Kincaid. "Or in the mind," said Mr. Muir, who had arrived without sound. After Forbes had left, Poirot requested a length of black fabric and a bright bulb. He instructed Ewan to hold the bulb at the level of the wellhead, while he wrapped the cloth behind the panel, blocking the ambient light. The stag stood firm. He adjusted the lamp to a very low angle. The sculpture sprang with shadows, and for a little moment I believed I saw a woman's form beneath the stag, arms extended, robe dropping, cut with the shallowest of strokes. Do you see it? I muttered to Ila. I don't know what I see, she said. There are other marks, Poirot stated. Scratches near the base are fresh. Something was recently added and then removed. A lantern, perhaps, or a mirror. He stood there, the bulb casting a large shadow of his head on the cloth, and for the second time since our arrival, I noticed that peculiar expression of bafflement on his face. He turned and stared up at the sky, which had cleared to a harsh northern blue. Hastings, he added, I am a man of order. He motioned violently toward the panel, the well, and the dismal walls. It refuses to come and heal. Then we hunt it, I responded firmly. He offered me a ghost of a smile. We'll try. The constable reappeared, this time accompanied by his sergeant, a Highlander with thunderhead-shaped brows. They took measurements, asked the same questions again, and gazed at Poirot with polite caution. Men of their kind love crimes that tread familiar ground. The local post delivered letters in the afternoon. Among them was the envelope Isa had expected from Edinburgh, the legal survey of the Endale. She read it in the library, her face losing colour. "What is it?" inquired Dr. Kincaid. Isla whispered gently, "The ending is broken. My uncle didn't renew it last Michaelmas. The estate goes to the eldest male in the collateral line, Alistair." There was a distinct and weighty quiet. Alistair entered at that moment, noticed the paper and came to a halt. "Cousin," he murmured, and to his credit I noticed genuine disappointment on his face. "I didn't know." "Of course you did not," Ila said. "Fergus only told people things that made him happy. Take it, it's yours now." Perce took the paper with Isa's tiny nod and read it with complete focus. "There is the estate," he explained, "but there is also cash, investments, and transportable assets." Mrs. M'Leod tartly stated she didn't have much cash. The lair was laid out for repairs. He felt proud of this place. "And the hydroelectric scheme lease," explained Dr. Kincaid. "Unsigned," Isa replied. He paused. "Convenient, some might say," Mr. Muir said softly. Alistair flushed. "I'll not have it. I will not let it be said that I wish the elderly man died. He was a pig, as we all know, but he was a Drummond." Poole folds the paper. "Mew McCrae, it is not what is said that matters, but what is, and we don't even know if the lair is dead. We have only a room, a window, and a fragrance." "We also have a patient," Dr. Kincaid replied as you left. She looked at Isa. "You have not slept." "I slept," Isa insisted adamantly. "But I had a dream about falling." As if the word had summoned it, the courtyard below erupted in a yell and clatter. We ran. Ewan stood beside the wellhead, his face the colour of chalk, his hand pointing to the rocks. At the base of the panel, there was a small dark object that resembled a withered fruit. Poirot stooped and lifted it with his handkerchief. It was a lamb's heart, dried to a leathery black. The scent of orange clung to it like sacrilege. "There are such attractions," murmured Mrs. M'Leod, her lips stiff. "The old women create these for lambing. Where did the Iluan come from?" "I swear it has not been there in an hour," remarked Jilly hoarsely. "Someone put it." "Someone or something," the sergeant muttered, coughing as if to clear his own foolishness. Poole gazed at the heart for a long time. He finally admitted that there is someone who knows the house, knows the stories, knows who gets letters and takes the aroma of an orange garden into a Highland well. "I would very much like to chat with that person." Despite the fact that we did not have a body, the Reverend Muir invited us to the chapel for prayers for the dead. We all went, and the small room was filled with breath, candle smoke, and the whisper of ancient words. When we came out, the moon had risen clear and cold, and the wind had stilled. "That is when she walks," explained Mrs. M'Leod. "When the air is too still, it cannot support a soul." She crossed herself again and stalked away, as if daring God to contradict her. Poe lingered. "Mr. Muir," he added, "you have the care of souls here, both alive and dead. Tell me, what happens to a house that has been filled with grief for too long?" The minister's lovely eyes shifted to the tower. "It learns it just like a psalm. And what happens when a man has shaped his house to his liking for too long?" Pooh inquired. The minister admitted that he sometimes breaks. Sometimes the will does. That night it started to snow. By midnight the court was draped in a pale sheet. At 2, I was awakened by a tiny wail, similar to the sound a hawk makes when it takes a hare or a lady makes when she sees something that shouldn't be there. I rushed to the window. To put it simply, the court was as smooth as parchment. From the foot of the tower door to the wellhead, and then to the post gate. There was a trail of single, spaced prints, as if left by a creature walking slowly and delicately. They were not men, dogs, or sheep. The toes were split as previously, and each print appeared to have a slight cord-like ridge at its outer edge. Poirot was already in the court when I arrived, bareheaded and his hair dusted with snow. He crouched by the first print and placed a little measuring rule next to it. Then he looked up at me and held his finger to his lips, making an unusual grimace. When the others arrived, he was the brisk Poirot again, pointing and comparing, bringing the sergeant's attention to the intensity of the sensations and the consistency of the stride. He stated that they were done purposefully and with a tool. See the cord mark? It's as if a shoe were linked to a string. A person might stand within the post and swing it in steps. Why? Inquired Alistair. Dr. Kincaid spoke as crisply as frost about creating a ghost. Ewan swore gently and meaningfully in Gaelic. We followed the prince to the postone. Inside, the snow had not blown. In the straw of the corridor, we discovered a coil of thin rope, a board with a crude leather pad attached to it, and 2 poles with hooks at their tips. Voilà, said Poirot. Ghost shoes. Who? Isa asked, her voice low. Poirot described someone with a strong sense of theatre. He looked at me and then at the steps. Hastings, go get Mr. Forbes. Don't let him leave. Mr. Forbes, the museum manager. Pooh's eyes were extremely bright. If you please. I went to do what he asked, and I knew right then that Poirot, the familiar maestro of the incomprehensible, had discovered his path forward. I've rarely been more wrong. Chapter 4. Pete was overcome by the aroma of orange. I passed Mr. Forbes 1/2 mile from the castle, the snow slanting like sifting flowers in a bakery. He was slogging along head down, stubbornly convinced that his feet are the only honest things remaining in the world. Mr. Forbes, I yelled, grabbing his sleeve. We must beg you to return, he spun, startled. Why? Because, as I mentioned, Mr. Poirot wishes it. That in Glencarron began to carry the weight of a warrant. He returned mumbling, and we discovered the household as we had left it, gathered in the hall like players between acts. Poirot stood at the hearth, neatly arranged, the small coil of rope and the ghost's single shoe on the table, as if for auction. Miss Forbes, Poirot said gently, you are interested in stones. I am also interested in the stones that fall from a window when a hole is drilled, the stone of a wellhead, where a secret lamp stands, and the small bit of stone that seals a message. If you want to sit, please do so. Forbes sat. He appeared unwell. You have black sealing wax, Poirot explained. So had the Laird. But the wafer Mademoiselle Isa handed me, torn from a seal, has a different aroma, one that clings to the panel you returned. What is it, Noli? Forbes lamented. It's in my beard oil. My wife laughs at me. But I can't take the rawness of the air on my skin. Why, my God, does it matter? It matters, Poirot explained, because a small thing clings where a large thing would be noticeable, because scent catches what the eye overlooks, and because the layer's letters were sealed in black, but one had a hint of orange flower to it. Do you think I sealed his letters? Forbes asked, obviously surprised. I've never seen them. Perhaps you sealed your own carton after Poirot returned, but the aroma remains. And perhaps you did not seal the letters. Perhaps you sealed a packet that rested on the Lair's desk and a wafer escaped. I simply ask that you tell me what you brought into Glencarron, besides your interest and beard. Forbes's hands twisted. I bought finally, he replied. I brought a magic lantern. Not to deceive, he requested to see it. A 19th century mechanism for projecting painted plates is on display at the museum for demonstration purposes. I showed him how the beam goes through dust. He was taken with it. He spoke of an experiment. What is the experiment? Isa demanded. Forbes yelled out his lecture. He stated that he wanted to challenge superstition by demonstrating how a little light and smoke might create a ghost. He borrowed a lamp and a fog machine, returning them the following day. That is all in my oath. Poe peered at the ledger. So he murmured softly, I'll play at haunting my own house. Perhaps to intimidate people who advocated for the hydroelectric project. Perhaps to test the courage of those who will inherit. Perhaps to make everyone look foolish. Only he extended his hands. Now he's gone. Alistair banged his fist on the table. The ghost shoe bounced. Then it was him and his own damned theatre. Poirot said, Not the prints in the snow. These were not made yesterday. Someone tonight wanted to take advantage of a state that had been prepared previously. Mr. Muir mumbled, "Fergus prepared this. And who knows more about doors and drafts?" "Who exactly?" Poirot spoke. He sent for Mrs. M'Leod. "Madame," he muttered as she stood before him, seemingly carved from the same oak as the panelling. When the lair wanted to be alone, he locked himself within the tower. He did. And when he was inside, did anyone ever approach him? Her lips narrowed. Dr. Conincade went when he had angina, and the preacher when he had his ideas. Nobody else. "You left?" Poirot said gently. "You or someone is carrying your keys. There is another way into the tower room." "There must be." "There isn't." She flared up, and God forgave me. "My grandma told me that beneath the settle in the oratory is a priest's stair that is long and sealed up. Fergus opened it to gather treasures when he was in the mood for archaeology, then closed it again. He sworn me to secrecy. He liked his secrets, as did Fergus. Who else knows? Huon Elistista, and possibly Isa, assuming she has ears as good as mine in this house." She gave the girl a not unkind look, although I never used it by book. I didn't. Pooh nodded as if the piece had fitted. "Where is the stairway located?" "As previously stated. The door of the oratory has been plastered over and painted to match the mouldings." Poirot bowed. "Then we won't disturb it just yet. I'd like to ask for something else for my present. Tonight we will set a watch. Mr. Muir is in the chapel, Dr. Conincade in the gallery. Mr. Forbes, is in the library with Hastings. Isa and Mrs. M'Leod together. Alistair and Ewan near Poston. I'll go to the tower." "To the tower? Did Isa cry alone?" He gazed at her. "Mademoiselle, there are times when one must go where the object is in order to determine whether it is a thing or something else." "I'll take a lamp," he said, his mouth twitching. "A chunk of orange." "Orange for company," he explained. It snowed all afternoon and cleared around dusk. The sky froze to glass. The moon rose extremely brightly. Ice coated the surface like sugar on a dessert. We took our places, as ludicrous and somber as children attending a midnight performance. At one point, there was another almost inaudible skir, this time from wind through reeds rather than pipes, half a mild scrape in the lengthy gallery. At 2, there was a tiny shake in the mirror's frame. At 5:20 to 3 p.m., a light erupted in the tower window and remained a warm golden, like a fireplace where there was none. Poirot's lamp. I waited, my pulse pounding as the light stood and stood. Then it abruptly glided to the windowsill, dipped and disappeared. We ran. The tower door was locked. I can't say because the lock was broken. Helistister and Ewan poured their weight on it and rushed in. The room was as frigid as snow. On the ledge a hand had disturbed the ash. The lamp lay shattered on the floor. Something on the bed made Isla cry. That was a coat. The layers are heather tweed. The right cuff discolored as if from old rain. In the pocket was a little parcel sealed with black wax. "Poe was not present," I cried. "He has followed in Fergus' footsteps. Find him." Thysa spoke with a wrath that could have crushed stone. "Find him if you let him fall." We scattered. There was no mark on the court and no shadow in the well. The postern was fastened. Mr. Muir's voice rang out from the church below, calm and precise like a man calling a psalm. "Come and look," we went. Poirot sat on a bench in front of the altar, as calm as if he had never moved. He clutched a small packet in his hand. On the altar was a square of linen with something wrapped in it, roughly the size of a heart. "Sir," he said as we stumbled inside. "You're quick. It's good. What happened?" I demanded. Instead, he gazed at Isa. Sorry, mademoiselle. I should have warned you. The stairway from the oratory leads behind the altar. I didn't fall. I came that way. It was vital to determine whether it could be completed quickly." "You knew," she murmured, relieved yet almost angry. "You knew, but you did not tell us." "I suspected, and he rectified. Now I understand. What about the packet?" He breached the black seal. Inside, a single sheet was folded twice. There were 6 words written on it in an unknown hand, and the aroma of orange came up like a ghost summoned by its name. Poirot read and was struck mute for the 3rd time in 2 days, not by terror or fury, but by something more serious, the world's reluctance to be as his thinking commanded. Dr. Conincade muttered, "What is it?" He held out the paper and we read it. "I found the staircase, excuse me." There was no signature, only a soot-like smudge in the lowest corner. 2 parallel lines are joined by a third. "A ladder mark," Mr. Muir replied gently. "Or a stag's antler," Issa said, shuddering. "We've gone no further," Alistair said rudely. "A child's note. Whom should I forgive for what?" Poirot folded the paper gently and returned it to the packet. "We will not decide tonight," he remarked. "There will be time for that." I stared at him. "Poirot." He did not meet my gaze. "We will not decide," he reiterated. I can't describe the chill those words gave me. I had grown to rely on him in the morning and the mail. To hear him declare he couldn't decide, the man who couldn't stand a crooked picture, was like hearing the waves reject the coast. Outside, a fox barked. The sound ran up the tower's wall and slid down the other side, like something trying not to be heard. Chapter 5. The Grey Lady Walks. We slept a little in the morning. The weather had changed again. A wet thaw caused a sluggish weeping from the ledges and a menacing drip from the iron chains of the well. The prince in the court filled, softened, and disappeared. Poirot was quite silent throughout breakfast. He did not touch anything on his plate, which was unusual for him. He is a man who values his comforts as much as his cases. "Poirot," I exclaimed in frustration, "this would not do. The man is either alive or dead. He fell or he didn't. The ghost is either a trick or not. We cannot sit between stools." He stared at me with a kindness that broke me more than rage could. "My friend," he asked, "do you know the story of the Gordian knot? There are knots that one can cut. Others are not knots at all, but rather the ends of numerous strings tangled together to form one. If you cut them, you are destroying something living." Dr. Kincaid set down her cup. "What is living here?" He did not respond. After breakfast, he requested Isla to accompany him on his walk. I watched from the window as they walked along the wall walk to the east tower. Two figures, one slight and one neat, the wind sweeping Issa's scarf like a pennan. They stood in the location where the Grey Lady was believed to stand. After a while, Issa raised her palm to her eyes. Poirot pulled something from his pocket and handed it to her. She flipped it over and over, as if it were a coin that would determine her fate. Then they came down. "What did he give you?" I inquired as to when she arrived. "A key," she answered. "To what?" "To a thing I must decide," she continued, and then stopped speaking. The sergeant, who was now the heir to a man who had chosen to step away and would not justify it, said that he would send men to drag the lock. "He fell or he didn't," he frankly stated, echoing my stupidity. "If he did, well, have him before the thaw has bleed him to the sea." Issa agreed without speaking. A Leicester swore it was pointless. Mrs. Mloud clattered saucepans in a way that suggested the devil himself should not ask her for breakfast, while Ewan walked around with the expression of a man who has begun to question his own shadow. Mr. Forbes, white and chastened, returned to his panel and bid his audience good night in a formal manner. He didn't get far. At the south gate, he came across something that made him run back like a child. He gasped as he saw a woman standing on the wall's outside curve, as if, dear God. He couldn't say any more. We went. There she was. I won't say that we saw the Grey Lady. I'll claim we saw a woman who had no human right to be there, delicate as a bird on a cliff edge, her robe a trick of light in mist, her hair indistinguishable from night. She raised her arms in the old tragic gesture, and the air around her seemed to thin out, as if it had moved aside to allow pain to pass. Poirot lifted his hand. "The hand that commands. Do not call out," he said. "Do not move." He went forward gently, as if approaching a strange animal. The woman didn't turn her head. She didn't drop her arms. He came to within about 6 feet of her, and then stopped and bowed. "Mademoiselle," he replied gently, "you're not a ghost. You are a woman in immense suffering. Will you come down?" She lowered her arms to gaze at him. I saw for a little moment a face that was neither young nor old, eyes that had cried a lot and were dry, and a mouth that had studied silence until it learned it. Then she walked sideways and vanished. There was no path there. There is no pathway there. We rushed to the location. The snow had melted into sticky moss. The stones sweated. Below was a drop that made your stomach turn. There was no sound. Poirot stood, breathing gently. He extended his hand and touched the lichen on the wall as if greeting an old friend. "Is it possible?" I said, hoarsely. "Yes," he answered. "It is always possible for a woman to vanish when no one has thought how she might have come." "Who was she?" Isla said, sitting still. Poirot stared at her for a long time. "I do not know," he responded, and I believed him. That afternoon the lock was dragged. They discovered nothing. Evening arrived early, as it happens in that latitude. The household assembled again, as if compelled by some ancient law. Poirot sat at the table, holding the black seal packet, the phantom shoe, the rope, the minister's psalm book, and the Maharry Drummond miniature. Heaven knows how he got it, but it was put before him like objects in a catechism. "Let us say what we know," he replied last. "We know that Fergus Drummond intended to perform a haunting. We know he had the means, and that a hidden stair enabled him to accomplish the impossible. We know that someone or people added to this a savour of old beliefs, charms, a prince in the snow, a perfume, and a woman on a wall. And we know he's gone," added Isla. Poirot tilted his head. "Yes, what are your thoughts?" she demanded. "In Edinburgh legal courts, they tell stories about you, Mia Poirot, and how you can pull the truth from a witness like a burr from a plaid. Tell me, is my uncle dead?" Pooh gazed down at his hands. When he raised his head, the look in his eyes surprised me. It wasn't grief, wrath, or triumph. It was humility. "I don't know," he said. The words appeared to fall into the room and remain there like a stone. Alice Tister scoffed. "Then what are you good for?" Mrs. M'Leod rounded on him. "You'll keep your tongue in this house, Alice Tister MacRae, or I'll salt it for you." He grumbled and withdrew, but the harm was done. The silence that followed was marked not only by exhaustion, despair, and terror, but also by disappointment, the rarest and most terrible of all. Poirot stood. He gathered the artifacts and gently placed them in his pockets, as if he were replacing bones in a grave. "I will go to my room," he stated simply. He went. Isa stood motionless, hands clutched at her sides. "Miss Drummond?" I said. She shook her head once. "I thought he was a magician," she explained. "I thought he would tell me what was true. Perhaps there is no such thing. Truth is not a magician," Mr. Muir stated softly. "It is a psalm. Some days you sing but don't understand the words. Some days you comprehend but can't sing." We dispersed. At midnight, unable to sleep, I went to the library. Poirot sat on the wing chair, the only light coming from the embers. He did not turn his head, but instead said, "Mon ami," he asked, "will you be furious with me if I tell you that I have always thought that the key of reason can open any door? Tonight, I stood in front of a door that did not accept the key. It is, how do you say, humiliating." I started to object, bluster, but he raised a hand. "Do not comfort me," he said. "It is wonderful that the haughty are occasionally forced to bow." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something little which he placed on the armrest of the chair. It was a black sealed packet. He glanced at it in the same way a man would look at a snake. "I'll open it in the morning," he explained. "In the light. The mornings always have a little more light." We sat silently. After a while the embers sighed and died. Somewhere in the house, a board creaked with the gradual memory of footfall. The aroma of orange stirred, fainter now, as if something far away had shifted in its sleep. Outside, between the clouds, a star appeared briefly before disappearing. Chapter 6, Letter and Lock. Dawn was a faint bruise. The men emerged from the lock with their faces turned to stone. They'd found something. Not a body, never a body, but the lead's stick trapped in reeds, the lead's cap half sunk and a remnant of coat fabric snagged on a root. Isa glanced at the objects and didn't cry. "Thank you," she replied to the sergeant. "You have fulfilled your responsibility." Poirot requested that we congregate in the chapel. He arrived with the envelope and an unexpected small wooden box which I had never seen before. It was carved from thistles. The lid fell back, revealing a child's treasures. A conqueror, a coin, a ribbon, and a tiny key that could have served as a toy. This, he claimed, was evidenced by the priest's stair in a cubby at shoulder height. The dust on the ledge had been stirred. Someone recently put it there. Uncle Fergus speculated that Isa may have stated Poirot or someone who went there to speak with him and wanted to keep something hidden from another. He put the box aside and held up the packet. "He says we opened it last night. It has 6 words. I found the stair, excuse me. We didn't know who wrote it or who was asking for pardon. During the night I came up with 3 responses. This morning I received 3 more. We shall not interpret any of them as verdicts." He broke the seal again and placed the paper on the altar. "We'll add to it," he added, pulling a second page from his pocket, this time from the coat in the tower, with a new black seal. He heated the wax with a candle. The stamp raised, and this time the stag was visible and proud. The letter inside was longer. Poirot did not read it aloud immediately. He stood quite still, as if what was on the page compelled him to move more slowly than usual. Then, in a careful voice, he read to whom it may concern, which means to those of my blood or those bound to me by affection or duty. If you are reading this, it is because I did something foolish. I tried to make a joke, but ended up making a harsh one. I intended to punish and punished myself. I intended to be a master and was mastered. I sent the Grey Lady walking to teach you all a lesson about fear, and she has taught me one. There is a stair in the oratory that I unlocked for fun and kept for convenience. Isa, my dear, please forgive me. I'd like to know if you'd retain Glencarron at any cost. Alistair, please forgive me. I'd like to know if you loved the sight or just the power. Forgive me, Mrs. Mloud, I would like to know whether your devotion was to me or to the house. Mr. Maria, please forgive me. I wonder if your God has place for elderly spirits. I had Mr. Forbes' lantern and machine. I created a ghost for both those who believe in ghosts and those who don't. Last night I heard a sound that was not mine. I went to the window and saw something I had not built. It smiled up at me. I am not a timid man, but I confess I was terrified. I've put the coat on the bed because I'm tired, and the coat is the only way you'll know I didn't go completely unwillingly. I am now going to the lock. Do not assign responsibility. You can blame me. I thought I could grasp the old stories. They've mastered me. Fergus Drummond. Nobody spoke. The words sounded like a confession and had the air of a suicide note. And yet there was that sentence. I am now going to the lock. Why is no one there if he has left? If not, why was there a hat, a stick, and a shred of cloth? And what had he seen? Poirot folded the letter and placed it near the first. His expression was unreadable. Is that all? Alistair inquired hoarsely. No, Poirot said. He took the little key out of the small wooden box and held it up. This opens a drawer on the Laird's desk. In that drawer, I discovered a will signed yesterday at 4 p.m. and attested by Mrs. Mloud and Mr. Muir. It leaves Glencarron to Isa Drummond in a basic, uncomplicated situation. Then Alistair spoke and stopped. Then Mr. Muir said gently, the teasing went too far and justice arrived late. Mrs. Loud's lips twitched. He had me witness it. She claimed he laughed while doing it. We'll see how much they want the place when the lady bends her back to it. He claimed he was a harsh man, but he was ours. Isel stood quite straight. Her face was identical to the miniature on the desk, despite the centuries that had passed. He's dead, she said. Or he isn't. He has repented, she stated. Or he played us until the end. Poirot stared at her with love that startled me. He told Mademoiselle that she could accept the will and bury her uncle in her heart without a stone. You may even decline it and send the law to stand on the lock side until he surrender. You may also perform a third thing. What's the third? She whispered. You could live here, he said, and let the house decide. She looked at him as if he'd struck her. That is not an answer, Alistair exclaimed. We can't leave it like way. Poirot turned to face him, and a spark of old imperiousness appeared in his face. Monsieur, sometimes there is no like this or like that. There is only the way things is. You want a killer to detest and a hero to mourn. I can't give you one. The Laird's old glare was filled with terror. Another played with prints and charms and smell. A third person may have strolled along the wall. The lock maintains its counsel. I can't break it. And the Grey Lady, added Dr. Kincaid, as steady as always. Poirot gazed up past her shoulder to the little window, where the morning light cast a pale cross on the stone. I don't know, he responded simply. I saw something with my eyes that my mind cannot comprehend. I shall not force it into a place where it does not belong. There was a noise at the door. Huon stood awkwardly with his headgear in his hands. He cleared his throat. There's a thing you should see, he said. Increase the burn in the reeds. We all went out of the chapel, through the gate and across the frosty ground to where a small burn widened into a pool before flowing into the loch. The reeds there were brown and tough. Something faint glinted among them. Cohen pulled away the stems with his stick and raised it. It was a little glass plate, one of the painted slides from a magic lantern. It was delicately adorned with a woman in a white robe, her hair flowing and her arms uplifted. The paint was broken, and the edges smoked as if a candle had burned them when held too close. Where did you find it? Inquired Poor. Yuen stated he was snagged on a route. There's a path of sorts from the tower to the burn if you can it. Poirot held the plate up to the light. The woman's demeanor was melancholy. Or perhaps I only saw what I had brought. Then we got this, he said. A ghost that can be created with light. Their tone that sounds like repentance. A transferable will. An open stare. A lock that protects secrets. And a smell associated with life. What shall we do with it? Mr. Muir said, tell the truth. What is the truth? Alice Dister roared as a rope burned. The truth that will allow us to live, stated the minister. Poirot gazed at Ela. He said, you are now the leader. The old house seems to accept it, as a wind blew through the reeds like sigh. Decide. She snatched the glass plate from him. She gazed at the painted woman for a long time. She then placed the plate flat on a stone and hit it with Ewan's rod. It fractured into dazzling pieces that flared briefly before becoming dim. She stated that the Grey Lady either walks or does not. My uncle died or didn't and chose the far side of the lock. The law may do what it must. I'll write to the sergeant. I'll accept the will. She turned and headed back towards the castle, her steps firm. Mrs. M'Leod followed, murmuring what sounded disturbingly like a blessing disguised as a reprimand. Alice Dister stood staring at the broken glass, as if it had spoken to him. He then laughed violently. Have it your way, he said to nobody in particular. We will see if the lady keeps you. He strode off. Mr. Muir bent down and picked up a fragment. He rotated it till the light formed a brief star on it, then threw it back into the fire. Will you accept it? I asked Poirot, helpless in the face of a non-conclusion. He gazed at me with those eyes that can see through pretend to reality. Hastings, he softly replied, sometimes the little grey cells are to be used not to command but to consent. He took the first note out of his pocket. I found the stair, excuse me. He folded it into a square and placed it beneath the stone where the plate had been, as one might leave a prayer. Then he turned and headed towards Glencarron with the minister, their heads slightly lowered, as if they had witnessed a secret but had not revealed it. That evening we departed the castle in the same way we had arrived, beneath a sky that had generously chosen to be low and damp. Isa stood at the huge entrance, the miniature of Mahiri at her throat. A ribbon looped through the small ring as if she had already made peace with the story she couldn't share. Thank you, she said to Poirot, for telling me something you didn't know. He bowed, and there was a grace to it that I had never seen in him before. On the train he was thoughtful. Finally he stated that there is a room in the big house of the world, Hastings, set aside for those things that cannot be remedied. It is not the salon with its neatness, nor the kitchen with its lovely arrangements, nor is it the waste heap. It is a room whose door is not locked. Perhaps one day I'll enter with more courage. And the Grey Lady, I inquired, because after all I am a simple man. He smiled slightly. She may have reasons for walking. If she does not, we have our own. That is enough. I was not pleased. I don't think I ever will be. But when I think about Glencarron now, I don't see the window, the well, or even the small black seal. I see my friend bowing on a wall walk to a woman who might have been light and might have been grief. And I hear him say, with a humility taught him by the Highlands, I do not know. And that was arguably the most surprising revelation of all. Epilogue from Hercule Poirot's private diary. Glencarron Highlands. The third evening following our departure, I write to calm the little grey cells that are still humming like wires in a gale. A window in the east tower leads to a court that absorbs mist in the same way that a cup absorbs wine. A guy could vanish there by artifice, water, or the allegiance of others to an old narrative. Which of the following are true at Glencarron? I can't say with certainty. Voila, Hercule Poirot has written the words that he despises. Jean, this confession is not an indulgence. It's a discipline. What is known must be catalogued, as well as what is unknown. The secret stair from the oratory opened and closed according to the Laire's desire. The illusion apparatus includes lantern slides, a fog machine, threads, ash, a mirror, and a discreetly drilled hole for a temporary step. Pete and Heather were familiar with the small theatre in the court, prints hung on ropes, a dried heart for the superstitious, and a perfume that was unfamiliar to them. Neroli is precise, clinging to wax and stone like a signature too bold to conceal. The will was signed and witnessed, restoring Mademoiselle L's rights that had been denied by previous law. The house is free of entails. A letter of repentance has been discovered, written in an unmasked hand, stating the writer's intention to walk to the lock. The negatives operate similarly to presences. There was no body, no blood, no rope left hanging, no pipes to play, but there was music because the house had learned the tune. Bowing to the figure on the wall-walk makes me feel almost physically uncomfortable. Was she a woman upon a narrow ledge, learned from childhood to step where sheep step? Was she a phantom of glass and light created by a plate discovered later in the reeds? Or was she, as the minister would argue, grief given shape by our consent? Hastings saw. The doctor didn't. I, Hercule Poirot, saw and bowed. To whom? To whom? The question is impudent. It does not deserve the answer. I have always believed that order is the universe's mercy to the human mind. But there's also courtesy. The universe receives the mind's mercy. As a young cop in Brussels, I made the mistake of closing a case prematurely. A widow's eyes taught me that speed is not synonymous with truth. The Highlands repeat the lesson. There's a room. Hastings would laugh at my metaphor. In the great house of the world there is no need to clean. It's not the lumber room of nonsense, none. It is a chapel for the irresolute. How do you express the unresolved? One enters with a hat in hand. I consider each individual. Miss Idler, courage without drama is the most practical virtue. She will keep Glencarron if he agrees to be kept. I gave her a key, not to unlock but to decide. There's a difference. McCrae shattered his pride. He is angry at the air because he is unable to strike the water. He may still be useful if given a task that requires the back rather than the tongue. Mrs. Maud, loyalty is as hard as oatcake. She recognized the stare, and only told me when it became an act of stewardship. Ewan is a creature of the hills. He understands prints, ropes, and reeds. He distrusts perfumes that do not contain gorse and bogertle. Wise, the minister was a psalm scholar. He understands how to deal with words that do not immediately convey their meaning. Good company for a detective who needs to learn a hymn of ignorance. Dr. Cade, modern, exact, without superstition, yet not blind to ritual. She stood before the mirror and refused to see what the mind is tempted to invent. Admirable. As for Fergus Drummond, I do not absolve the dead. I do not condemn them. He made a ghost to rule a house, and discovered too late that a house ruled by ghosts makes a ghost of its master. If he lives still, it is by the will of a coward or a penitent. If he is dead, it is by the will of a proud man punished by his own theatre. The lark keeps counsel better than a priest. Hastings believes I am chastened. He is correct but not defeated. Le petit cellule grises are not wounded by one mystery that will not sit. They are educated. Next time perhaps I shall know when to command and when to consent. I leave one decision recorded. I shall not publish the details of Glencarron. Let the official note read as the police will have it. Laird missing, presumed drowned. The rest, lantern, stair, scent, and the woman on the wall belongs to those stones. If ever I return, it will be as a guest who removes his shoes at the chapel door. For now I close the book. There is a smile upon my lip that is not my usual, how say you, self-satisfaction. It is smaller, gentler. It concedes that in certain valleys, even the moustaches must bow to the wind. Hercule Poirot. Music. And so concludes the Grey Lady of Glencarron, a Highland riddle of light and shadow where old stones kept their counsel and certainty learned to bow. This tale is our original work, offered as an affectionate homage to Agatha Christie. Classic bones, our own blood and breath. Where are you listening from tonight? And what are your Halloween plans? We're taking notes. If you enjoyed this, please share it with one friend who loves classic mysteries.